Welcome to the Goddess of Womanhood. I'm your host Kaya, an international Hatha yoga teacher and breathwork guide living cross-culturally. In this podcast, I speak with women from around the world about identity, health, culture, and what it really means to live as a woman today. These are honest, layered conversations inviting you to reflect, reconnect, and explore your own experience of womanhood. Today I'm speaking with Carrie Froggett, yoga teacher and founder of the Frog Project, an online yoga platform that supports people through times of change with a special emphasis on women's experiences. Carrie brings a thoughtful, practical approach to yoga, seeing it as a tool for navigating life, especially the messier, more uncertain parts. In our conversation, we touch on how yoga has shaped her own connection to womanhood and health, how intercultural living has impacted her perspective, and what purpose looks like when you're living from a place of alignment. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you.
Shall we start with the first question then?
Sure.
Okay, you started yoga during your teens. How did you get drawn to yoga? Was there a particular reason for starting it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably the same for everybody that starts everything. You try something for the first time and you have like a specific intention or goal or something you want to get out of it, and then what it evolves and grows into, if you stick with it and continue, it kind of shifts and changes. And so I first started not that young, maybe I was already at university, so I was 18, 19. Like I had tried yoga classes when I was younger at school, but they'd meant nothing to me. And then it wasn't until I was at university that I first started yoga classes, but not with a teacher. I had a DVD and I had a best friend, Fee, and me and Fee used to put the DVD on, and it was Antonia Kidman, who is Nicole Kidman's sister, is an Ashtanga yogi, and I didn't know what Ashtanga yoga was. But we had the Antonia Kidman DVD and we loved it. And she was teaching us the Ashtanga series, which again, we didn't know at that time that that's what we were doing. But we would do yoga in my university room. And it was on the 12th floor of this kind of block of halls of residence in Sheffield. And we met some people in a bar one night on a student's night, and they lived in the block that was opposite, called Earnshaw, and they were like, "Oh, you're the girls that do the exercise in the window." And we were like, "Oh my gosh," because at university at that time, like doing exercise or any kind of self-care wasn't really the thing to do. It was a very kind of drinking, party culture, sleeping late, going to lectures, that kind of thing. And so me and my friend Fee would like try and do yoga as much as we could, and we did it to ground ourselves. That was the reason for doing it. I had a lot of anxiety around that time that kind of started like 17, 18 years old for certain circumstances that occurred. My anxiety from sort of 17 to about 27, so a decade, was like through the roof. And yoga really, really helped. And so things like I remember the day of my driving test, I must have been about 19. And I was like, right, I'm going to get up early. I'm going to do my whole yoga DVD before my driving test. And it was just this sort of belief in me that if I did my yoga, then what came next would be better. If I didn't do my yoga, then I wouldn't be grounded and centered. And so it kind of spiraled from there. My DVD collection grew, and the Fionas of my life multiplied, so I'd have more friends I'd invite into my room. And then when that was kind of too small and I moved, then at one point I was living in China and teaching there, and we used to use one of the classrooms at night, and I'd invite all the teachers. We lived in a residential kind of teaching block, invite them all over. We'd put a DVD on the projector, this time using DVDs of Tara Stiles, who is a teacher of mine now, who I have a very good relationship with. But we would put those DVDs on, and then a group of like 8 or 10 of us, foreign teachers living in China, would have yoga classes on like a Tuesday night or a Thursday night. So always, there weren't yoga studios in those places at that time. Like I don't think there were any in Sheffield when I lived there. There was certainly none in this city, Nanjing, in China, when I lived there. And so we created yoga studios with DVDs. And that was like for the best part of 5 or 6 years. And then it kind of grew and evolved after that. So that was the beginning. And the goal was calmness, groundedness, like relaxation. That was where it started. Yeah.
That's quite cool. And just a side question, those other teachers, from the school who joined, were they both men and women, or more women?
They were mostly women. I can think of one man, but he was in a couple, an American couple, really, really young. It's the first time I'd met someone, they were like married at like 20 and they'd come to China together. And I was like, isn't this expat life for like young single people? I'm like, there's a couple? It was so strange, but they were from a community where people marry pretty young. And to me, 20 was young. So they came together. They were math teachers. And then the other were women, I think, but yeah, I can't really remember. I was like there, and then people would come and go, the group would change, and I was like sometimes alone, sometimes with one person, sometimes with 8 people. Yeah, I was the constant, and then everyone around.
So you already started to set up something, right?
Oh, yeah, yoga class.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, you clearly explain, what the yoga did there for you. Do you feel as well that it has contributed somehow in shaping you from a young woman into your 20s?
Yeah, it definitely gave me some foundations because at the time I didn't realize it because I was just young and going around and university and then travel and working abroad. And I worked abroad straight from university through the whole of my 20s. And when I look back, understanding what I do now about anxiety and the nervous system and mental health, I definitely wasn't in a good place in my early 20s, but I didn't feel like it. I felt, I just living my life and you feel invincible at that age. But there were certain signals that made me think, like I could have used something more at that time. But yoga was the foundation. And when it became really significant, it was when I moved to Pakistan and I was maybe 24. And by this point, I'd actually started doing a lot of physical exercise. I'd started running, inspired by a beautiful friend of mine who runs just crazy. And she was living in China at the same time. And she was like, you should try running. She probably saw my mental health and she was like, you should try running. And I was like, okay. So I started running and I got excited about it and I signed up for a 10K and then a half marathon. And I felt so different from having that physical outlet. And again, now what I know about what happens to the body when you run, like it makes a lot of sense in hindsight. At that time, I didn't know. I just know I felt good for going for a run. So then when I moved to Pakistan, this was like the height of my sort of physical fitness. And I lived in the Himalayas in a very, very remote little village. And all the women wore like full dupatta when they were with each other and then like completely covered from head to toe in black when they were out in the community. And they were like, you, Carrie, cannot run here. And I was like, no, what am I going to do? This is what I need to do. And they were like, your exercise is indoors. And I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? So I got Keep Fit DVD. Everything was DVDs back then. And then my yoga ones, and I had by this point like a massive library. And so every day it was like yoga in the morning, physically trying to like tap into that energy that I got from running, and it just became like a cornerstone. And if you ask my housemate from back then, she'll laugh because every day it was like yoga, and I pulled her in as well, and of course she did it with me a lot. But that became daily then for the 2 years that I lived there. I can't remember the question.
If you feel that has kind of
Oh yeah.
how it shaped you more from teenager into
Yeah.
going into
Yeah,
your 20s.
That's right. So it was the foundation, like my it was always there, and it was a tool that I was learning and recognizing and kind of internalizing. Like I never went to it with a goal. I just started and it felt a certain way. And then when I came into my mid-20s, and Pakistan was a real turning point for me in terms of everything, like my anxiety left and other stuff kind of happened, and it was an amazing period of time. And yoga like ramped up. So maybe there's a bit of a
It's
uh,
interesting to hear, because I can imagine, like when you were first seeing how you were living with the women, how they said no, you know, here you can't run, and this is not basically how women live
yeah.
here, I guess, right? So what is it that was so kind of exciting and so interesting for you to live, and that your anxiety disappeared as well?
I think I was living more aligned with what I wanted to do. I had, like, it was amazing. I don't know if I can paint a picture, but it was like the mid sort of Himalayas, like high. I don't know the altitude, my numbers. I could say like the wrong number and be out by like 1,000 meters, so I won't try and attempt that. But it was high, and it was gorgeous, and we were outside all the time. So we lived. It was a primary school that was in the epicenter of where the earthquake happened, and it was a valley called the Kagan, and a village called Kauai, and the village was totally obliterated in the earthquake. Again, I don't know the year, in the 2000s, and the there was three sort of founders that built the primary school, and the primary school was built to kind of support the villages and the villages around, where the girls didn't have any access to education and the boys mostly were going to madrasas. And the founders were three men. One had used to work in the UN from Islamabad. One was a Pakistani rugby player, and one was a politician that was linked to the Kurgan Valley. So the three chaps kind of all got together and were like, we're going to build this school. And they were like, well, how are we going to do this? Because the money that we need to do it is immense. So they were like, well, foreign volunteers will come and work for free. And it's true, and we did. So at this point, I'd been teaching in China for 4 years. I'd done my master's in international education, and I wanted to move into that area of like NGOs and international development and things, but from an educational lens. And so I got this job in Pakistan as a volunteer. But just adored it, and worked with this school, primary school. There were 17 local teachers that were from the different villages, but they were all women. They were all young, so from about 17, 18, maybe to about 25. So when they did get married, they would have to leave the school. So there was this window, which was amazing. These women were educated. They were from like good families. They were coming to the school, and then we, as the foreign volunteers, were training them. With, I mean, I look back on it now, and it's just a load of people working together. Like there was no experts there. Like we were in our mid-20s. Yes, we had degrees, but it doesn't mean a lot, you know. We were working together. These women were incredible. They cared for the kids. The kids came from all over, girls and boys. And we were trying to create this culture of education, and obviously we were teaching them English from the beginning. All of the classes were in English, which was fab. So they were learning English, and they're adding me now on Facebook. Like that, some of them are sort of in their early 20s, and they're like, "Teacher Carrie," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I knew you when you were 5 or 8 or whatever it was." So that was a very cool experience, and that, I think, just working in a place where I felt free, being outdoors all the time, like all the time. Every evening we're sat by the bonfire or just at like the little table, and the view was just the mountains. Like our activities on a Saturday was going for a hike. We'd go for a hike and we'd bump into a family that lived there that were linked to the school, and they'd say come, and they'd make lassi from literally the milk that they milked off the cow just there. Then they'd like cook chips. Like they always did French fries, and they fried them in like the grossest oil, but like over just like a little tandoor. And it was just, it felt so wholesome. And again, now I know when you hear podcasts about like getting back to basics and back to the earth and all of those kind of things, like at that time, that's how I was living, and I think that's what kind of obliterated the anxiety, um, for the most
And
part, you
it's
know.
and it's also indeed what you're saying. I mean, if you more literally have that experience, right, of being close to the earth and to nature. I mean, we can easily talk about that, right? No, we see nature as maybe as the seasons that change, no, which is all good and fine. But I think there's so many cultures who live so differently and so much more with a connection to earth and really just with what is there, which is enough as well, right?
Yeah.
Could be enough.
Yeah, and it's just fascinating to look back on it and be like, that's how we were living. It wasn't like I'm going to Pakistan to live close with nature. It was
Mhm.
like I'm going to Pakistan to work for this school to get experience in international development. Same with yoga. Like I'm going to do yoga to X, Y, and Z, but in the end, it's something else. Like whatever you set out to do leads to something else. And I think that in more modern times now, like people make decisions based on what they think like they're going to get directly. Like I'll spend a day without my smartphone because it will do X, Y, and Z. Like
Mm.
I'll spend time in nature because it will do X, Y, and Z. And I'm also guilty to that now. But back then, and it wasn't even that long ago, they were the benefits that I didn't know I was going to
Yeah.
get. Like there weren't smartphones. I had a laptop. It was heavy as a brick. It took about 10 minutes to like boot up. The internet like was questionable and it would take like 20 minutes to load a single page. So it wasn't, there wasn't that like we didn't have phones that were connected to all sorts of platforms and things. So it was just simpler, I think.
Mm. So now you're talking so about this, right? Because I think within your, from your own experience, but probably also how you teach, it's in a way about navigating life, navigating transitions. Is there something that you can tell more about that, and maybe also how that comes back in your teaching now, or how people might be talking about that, and you can pick up on that?
Yeah. Like this kind of started in Pakistan. So like we'd have this group of 17 women and like behind closed doors, like their dupattas were like falling off. You could see their hair. Like we would have parties after school, like in the staff room, and we'd do henna and we'd do makeup and we'd thread eyebrows. And it would be amazing sort of in this space. And then as soon as, like the Jeep comes to pick us up and take us back to the village, it was like, right, everything back on, like cover it all up, like out we go. And I was so like drawn to these ladies. So like they were just my friends. Like there was like no difference except for there was a lot of difference culturally. Um, and I felt so excited about how passionate they were about the children, about education, about school, things like building the curriculum, like how do we teach reading, bringing all the books and all the characters to life, like how do we teach, we never taught yoga, but how do we teach sport, how do we bring movement in and songs in and dance in and all of this kind of, in the English language world they call it like communicative style learning, as opposed to what's more traditional, especially um, in the East is like rote learning. So I don't know if it's the same. Well, I spent some time in Kenya and it was very similar. I don't know if it's the same in Tanzania, but very much like, especially teaching English, like say the word, repeat the word, say the word, repeat the word, write the word down 5 times, and there's no communication there, no communicative like back and forth, and so it's very difficult to integrate and to learn. And the same comes with yoga, I think, and the same comes with teacher training. If you don't believe in it and you don't feel it, then
Mm.
you're never going to learn it. And even if you learn it for a second, but then you don't retain it. And so I became really really interested in teacher training at this point. And one of the volunteers, which the school was very lucky to have her and I was very lucky to have her as a mentor, she was like really really experienced, and had worked in education for a couple of decades. And so she taught me a lot, and she used to run workshops and things with the teachers, and they learned a lot. But together we learned a lot about how I don't really know about how, like, when we have strong values and strong beliefs behind what we're doing, it becomes more than like, now that kid can speak English. It's like, what does it mean for that kid to speak English? Like, I was never interested in TEFL in terms of like, teaching kids how to speak English, but what will it do for them? How will it help them? What does it open up? Like, being able to read English books are amazing. A few years later, I worked in Sri Lanka and they had this amazing project with HSBC called Kids Read, and we had like a budget, I don't know, of thousands of pounds, and they were like, go buy any books, and I was like, what? Any children's books? And I like was on Waterstones and just buying like every children's book. And this is before I was a mother, so it was before I knew actually quite how amazing books are for kids. But it just opens up the world, and so having English did that. And so my experience with those teachers in Pakistan was just about how when we work together and we concentrate on this, we are helping the school, yes, but we're also helping these individual ladies like have purpose in their day, feel excited, working together. How do we make classrooms more beautiful? How do we make storytelling more beautiful? How do we make trips more beautiful? How do we do all of these things? We have parties after school, and instead of just sitting eating French fries, we're like doing henna and eyebrows and all of this stuff, and it's amazing. So then when I moved out of this eventually into yoga, we do so much teacher training and teacher development in Frog Project. Like, that's what it's about. It's not necessarily about being a better teacher. It's about learning more about yourself, and then how can what lives deep down inside of you come through in your teaching. Because if it doesn't and it's not aligned, then teaching is hard and you burn out. And you'll know this, you'll know yoga teachers that teach like 20 hours a week and just get burnt out because you're just giving. But when you teach from a place that feels like you, and this is a phrase that my teacher, Tara Stiles uses, but when it feels like you, it's not difficult anymore. And I learned this recently actually from two teachers, Melanie and Jenny, and they were saying like, it's not a performance. Like teaching isn't a performance. And yoga teaching has got a really bad rap for being this like very performative, like how do I look, and it's nasty. But it exists not just in yoga, it exists in all industries these days, especially with social media and just being on cameras all the time. I was watching my daughter this morning, and she's got her sunshades on, she's 5, and her scooter, and she's like singing in front of the glass windows. And I'm like, she's performing for herself, but that's what people do like 24 hours a day in front of their phone. Like, you have like a stern face and you're doing what you're doing, and you pick up your phone and you're like, ah! And I do it as well, but it's like that like face to, so yeah, I think I've gone a bit off track.
No. It's very interesting what you're saying, because I think that's one of the main points, right? To what you live and feel from the inside. That's that's what you want to. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Just thinking in your story, do you feel, because was it after this whole intercultural experience that you got children, or was it still part of that life?
No, it was years later.
Years later.
Yeah, after Pakistan. So I had my first child when I was 31, and I was like 25 at this point. Yeah, from there I moved to Malaysia, and then I met my husband, and then from there we lived in Sri Lanka, and then we returned to the UK, and that's when I had my first baby, and then the second one was pretty soon after that as well. So they were both early 30s.
So just if we're bringing it back to womanhood, and how basically your experience have contributed, right? All the experience contribute to who we are at this moment, right? And I don't know to what extent womanhood is really, in that sense, important to you, or that you really, what you embrace as a woman. But can you kind of feel or go back to, let's say, shifts that you have experienced? And it's really, you've got that whole intercultural life. You go back to the UK, you're pregnant, you become a mother, and then you started Frog Project also while being a mother. Let's say those, because I mean, a lot happens there, right? All those kind of transitions. Is there something that you can share about that?
Yeah, so it's like a totally different life. thinking you're invincible and being in your 20s and traveling around the world and doing these things that you think are so great and are so great, like they feel great. Malaysia was amazing as well, and it was the same thing, like working with language teachers, predominantly women. Like, was all teacher training there for 2 more years. But there was so much independence and freedom, and I lived in like a beach house, and it was just and started teaching yoga as well. That's when I was like, right, we don't have a DVD player anymore, DVDs are out, what are we going to do? So I like got some confidence and was like, well, I know a few sequences. So then I got my teacher friends then to the beach, and we did more yoga. But then it transitions, like you grow up, and I think, like I was saying, like at that time there was a transition as well from like 18 to 25, but I didn't really see it. But the transition then from sort of 29 into my 30s was much more significant. Like life changed completely. Like I'm in the UK. I haven't lived in the UK since I was 13. We left when I was a teenager to Asia. I grew up in Hong Kong, and back in England, suddenly I'm like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? But I was married and we bought a house, and so I just started doing things that I thought I wanted to do. And we had this conversation before, right? Like, the grass is always greener. Yeah, like, so I have a house, so I dug a veg patch. And like the things I tried to do when I was living overseas, like I tried to grow vegetables in pots on my balcony in Malaysia, but there was too much sand and it didn't work and everything died. And so I'm in England and I'm like, right, like I can actually so I got a greenhouse and I got a vegetable garden. And I started doing these things that were so different, but I'd wanted to do. And I got pregnant, and at the same time was just starting the Frog Project. I just started doing some classes. I'd trained like a year before that as a teacher in the end, a yoga teacher training. And got pregnant, and like me and Martin, we talked about it, and I was like, I'm gonna like not work for this time. I'm gonna have the kids, and I really believe in like staying at home and like taking care of them. And it's very, very common in our culture that babies go to nursery at about 10 or 11 months. I know every country is totally different. My brother and his wife have just had a baby in America, and that's like so much sooner. You go back to work after 2 or 3 months, like commonly. And here it's about 9 or 10, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay home. However, I'm like super driven and constantly like thinking ahead. And it's interesting, I'm obsessed with books, and I'd bought this children's book called The Idea or something. And it's about like how you have this idea and it follows you around and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until one day it like consumes you and you can't see your idea anymore because you're in your idea. And I felt like that. Like I was like, I want to do this thing. I want to have this community. I want to do more yoga. I want to teach. I want to do teacher training. And so I was like, right, we're going to work on this still. And so we kind of were doing it while raising the kids. And every time I read a story to the kids, I'm like daydreaming at the same time about like what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. But it's not without its challenges. Like those early days of motherhood, like the first baby, are hard. And I won't go into details, but the birth was like was not great, and it was a tough time. And those first like months, no one can prepare you for like how significant it is. And I lost like all my self-confidence. Like I go to these mums groups and just feel like such an outsider, like didn't want to look at anyone, didn't want to speak to anyone. It's probably just sleep deprivation, but at that time you don't know, and you're like, oh my God, like this is hard, really hard. But the beauty of it is the hormones kind of wash it away. And now I look back on it and I'm like, wasn't it a magical time? Like feeding in the middle of the night, bonding with my baby. But at the time we were like, this is the worst thing in the world. So it was a transitional time. And I think, like you say, like everything that's come before builds to that moment. But I think like having a kid, like it whips everything out from underneath you that you thought you knew. like shakes it all upside down, and then it's like, there you go, put that back together. And you're like, oh my God, how do
Yes.
I? Yeah, it was a fun time.
So from there until now, because I mean, you had the challenges as becoming a mother. At the
Yeah,
same time, you're working on Frog Project. Your children are now, what age are they?
yeah, six, nearly six,
How
six and
old are
seven,
they?
6 and 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how, while still, feeling yourself or kind of finding yourself back, while
Yeah.
all of this is obviously developing, how, let's say that phase, how is that for you now, and how has it led to
And
what it
yeah,
is now?
so I was talking to, like, thinking about this session today, talking to my husband last night about it. It's interesting what you forget, isn't it? When you like look back, you're
Yeah.
like, wow, it's been a decade since we moved to England. Like, what have we done? Apart from have a 7-year-old, so we've been doing that. But yeah, so we had our second baby pretty soon after the first, and which was amazing. Like, I would not change that for the world. It's so great. They're just the best of friends, and it works so well for them. But Roxy, my little one, was about 8 months old, and actually it was just before that the seed was sown. Went away for Christmas, and she was maybe, yeah, 6 months old. It was the Christmas before um, lockdown, so we didn't know lockdown was coming. It was like the last couple of months, right? And we went away, and me and Martin sat in the evenings, and we had like this big paper. We took big paper with us and big pens, and we were like, let's like they call it blue sky thinking, don't they, in like corporations? Like, let's just dream big and write all our ideas down. And I was like, I want to do something, Martin. Like, there's something inside. He's like, okay, we have to start here. And we like wrote down our values, and we wrote down our beliefs, and we wrote down like, what is it we believe in? What is it we want to share? What can we share? All of these kind of things. And I think I still have all this paper. We made like 10 massive sheets of paper over this week-long trip. Every night the kids went to bed, we're like, right, let's do it. And we like were passionate and brainstorming and all of this stuff. And then we get back to reality, and we've got 2 little kids, and COVID's coming, and we're like, oh my God, what's happening? And at this point, I'd already started teaching again, like in person, and had like a pretty good group of people, maybe teaching 3 or 4 classes a week. And I couldn't like stay at home. I was like dropping my kids off with my mother-in-law, like, I'm gonna be back in an hour, I'm just gonna teach. I just really, really didn't want to stop teaching yoga, even though I was like staying at home with the babies. COVID happened, and I was like, oh my God, we have to teach a Zoom class. So we like the next day, literally the next day, got all of my students, and we're like, sent them a Zoom link. I'm like, come, let's try this. So we did, and it was amazing. And still students that were in that very first class are like still Frog Project members now, still come in like several times a week. And it was great. And so we just like ramped up from there and did a few classes. And then I had a couple of yoga friends, and I was like, do you want to teach with me? Because I can't teach all the classes. It's COVID, and I've got no childcare, and my husband's working. So then these girlfriends of mine, Orly and Andrea, started teaching as well. And we like grew. And that's kind of how it happened. So we just sort of balanced it. So we were, what, 2 years, like in and out of lockdown and COVID until the kids went to school. So I was like, if I can make this work, then by the time my daughter goes to school, like, hopefully this can be my job. Like, I don't want to go back to, I want to be flexible. I want to be dropping the kids at school every day. I want to pick them up. I want to take time off during the holidays. And that's what I do now. Like, I'm there every day at 3 o'clock to pick the kids up. Yeah, I go back to work in the evenings, and I'm there in the mornings, but I take them to school every day. Like, the Easter holidays come, I take 2 weeks off. I still teach, but they're amazing now. They just like play while I teach, and like it balances really well. But it was hard in the beginning. Like, Martin had to do a lot of like walking, crying babies up and down the street while I like taught my class. But we made it work. So
Yeah,
all of
it's
those big
beautiful.
papers we did all like came to life later on.
And maybe even in maybe in a way that, although you don't want to kind of think it that way, but the lockdown might have actually really kind of stimulated the project to start, right? Because otherwise they might have still been on papers and waited for when the kids would have gone to school. It's, I think, we were kind of pushed to really obviously go into that online space.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's great.
I think so. I think so. It definitely like fueled it. It brought it like forward much quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I would have sat on it for years though. I was like bursting at the seams to do stuff. Um, but yeah, it you can't that's the beauty of like not being too caught up in a plan or an idea. It's just like do what feels right in this moment. And yoga talks about this, yoga philosophy does, doesn't it? It's like the faith in yourself, faith in the future, faith in everything that's around. And it's like I talk about it with Martin about hope, and he's like, hope's such a negative thing. Like it's and I'm like, passive hope is, when you're like, oh, I hope this will happen. But active hope is different. Active hope is like a sense of self-belief. And without a sense of self-belief, like if you don't believe you can do it, right? Nobody will. And we were having this conversation with our son last night. He's down on himself about something that happened. I can't think what. He's 7, and every day there's like the biggest catastrophe because that's what happens in a 7-year-old's life. But I'm like, you have to believe it, because if you don't believe it, no one else will believe it. And he's like, ha. I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Leading yoga.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's all yoga philosophy and Anna.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. I'm curious to see when they when they get to being 11, if it's going to be kind of pushing you away, pushing all the yoga away, but they will come back to that again. Like it's interesting with my boys. I see it as well. It's like, and then they have an experience at school and they come back and say, oh, mom, how was that again? Like, how should I better breathe? Or so there is, I think there's a beautiful foundation, and especially if they're now still so young. They'll turn 10 and 12 soon.
You're a few years ahead of me. Oh, they're still using it though. That's good, because I am scared that they're just going to totally rebel, and that
they might, but I think they will at one point pick it up. I think they will. I think they probably understand situations where they would benefit from it. And even if they don't have the tools, they would come and ask. Myself here, I'm teaching 1 class a week with the kids, and I have both my boys in it. Yeah. So
I admire kids.
So I think there's for sure. Sorry?
I was just saying, I admire kids yoga teachers so much. Like you have to have such a lot of energy. I've done like short stints. Like I'll do like a 6-week course, but then I'm like, then I need a break of like 2 years. Like it's so much.
Yeah, but it's interesting to balance, right? Your yoga work and just indeed how you live yoga. I mean, it comes from inside, and that's also what probably thrives everything. But indeed to combine it with motherhood, and it's what I think it's what I would like to see, and maybe getting to, is really that you're really that center, and everything just really kind of flows from that, regardless of what you're doing, so that there are not those different roles. Not saying, oh, here I am mother, here I'm the yoga teacher, here I'm wife, here I'm me. That it's all all together.
Yeah. And that really actually reminds me of something that maybe would be interesting, is that like, so yoga, as you know, comes in many, many different forms, right? And I was like physically practicing asana a lot before I got pregnant. And then when I got pregnant, I was like, oh, I can't do it. Like, it makes me feel sick. I can't do a downward dog. Like cat cow just felt awful on my abdomen. I was like, what am I going to do for the next like 9 months? And that's when I discovered yin yoga, and I was like, I bought a book, and in the back of the Bernie Clark book, there was a sequence for prenatal yoga or something. And so I just did that. I'd go in the conservatory, which was hot, at my mother-in-law's house where we were staying. I would put a timer on, I'd time each pose, I'd do them all, and then I'd fall asleep in Shavasana. And I do that every single day. And that's when I like converted to yin. Then after the baby, like couldn't do anything and was tired and stressed and all this stuff. And I remember my yoga teacher saying in Thailand where I did my training, Gina, she's an amazing, amazing woman. She said, if you find yourself like emotionally just like in a mess, like depression and anxiety and all of those things, and I felt all of those things in the early days of motherhood, and I think most people probably do, to some degree. And she's like, if you can't physically do anything about it, like I couldn't run, I couldn't do yoga because I had this newborn. All I could do was put it in a pram and push it, otherwise it would cry. And so I was like, okay, so I'm pushing a pram. What can I do? What can I do? And I remember she said, listen to philosophy. If you listen to philosophy, what it does is it does the same as if you were running. So I was like, okay, this is my yoga. So I found, and I've looked for it ever since, and I've never refound it. But I found this amazing series of recorded talks, probably recorded in like the 90s, I don't know, of this American woman, no idea what her name was, but she was going through the Yoga Sutras, sutra by sutra, and basically like commentating on them to this audience. You can picture her like there with her like lectern talking Yoga Sutras to a group of like 200 people or something. That's what I imagined. And I just had this series, I found it on this random website. And every day I'd push the pram and listen to this, push the pram, listen to this. And that's what got me through those early days. And I wish I could find who she was now. I've tried, but I can't. But so many of the like things that she said in those lessons just landed and really helped me transition that time, because whatever's going on for you at the time, there's always something that can help. And it's not necessarily what we were doing before. And people like berate themselves, like on Frog Project, we'll have someone do yoga every day for 3 years and then they disappear and they don't come back for 2. And then they come back and they're like, I'm back. I'm like, did you do anything? They're like, I've done nothing for 2 years. I've been like totally off the thing. And it's so easy to fall off what you do regularly. And there's nothing wrong with falling off, but when you do fall off, then it's important to be like, what can I do instead? Like, what helps me to feel connected during this time where I don't want to do asana? Like, there's no problem with not doing asana, but the problem is when we just say, I'm not gonna connect to myself. I'm just gonna not. And that's where trouble occurs, I think, internally. And so it's important, I think, to acknowledge how practice looks different constantly through different phases of life. And again, like I came to this through like sheer desperation of feeling just like awful in the early days of motherhood. And now I look back on it and I'm like, that was my savior. But at the moment, it wasn't like a real practical solution to an issue. It was just like clawing my way out of a well, trying to find some light. And it was there and it was magic. Yeah, maybe that's interesting.
Yes, that's absolutely interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's obviously those times, right, with the baby, you're all the time there and you're giving so much, so it's so difficult indeed to feel yourself. I mean, there's maybe that 1 minute that you can sit and then you need to get up again. So it's beautiful, I think, how you've integrated that. And then still yoga. And I mean, from that time, I mean, you must have learned a lot as well. Well, listening, it's for yourself, but obviously also now what you can use in the Frog Project, I think.
Yeah,
What you share with the students, but also with the yoga teachers trainings that you lead, right? So there's I think you wrote an article about menopause or perimenopause, menopause, transitioning through that. Is there something you would like to share? And I mean, it's obviously from a yoga perspective, I guess, how
so
to live that phase.
A disclaimer, like I can't speak from experience, not yet.
No.
And so I find that really important to say, because in 10 years or in 20 years, I'm probably going to have a very different way of talking about it. A little bit like if you teach prenatal yoga before you've been pregnant. It's like you can teach what you've learned from your teacher, but you can't teach it from a very specific place. And so what my understanding of yoga for menopause and perimenopause comes from my teacher, and her name's Gina. She teaches from the yoga philosophy about this being a period of transition. So like a period of moving from your teens into your like younger 20s, from your 20s into your 30s, from, you know, being not a mother to being a mother. Like all of these phases of life are transitional times. And when you move through perimenopause into menopause, it's another transition of life, as if you went from, you know, working to retirement, or your children moving out. Like all of these are significant times of life, and in these significant times of life we can use the wisdom of philosophy and yoga to contemplate, to reflect, to notice how it's impacting us, how we feel. And yoga philosophy talks about the transition of perimenopause and menopause as like a woman's sort of like path to wisdom almost. It like signifies that they've moved through that chapter. They've moved through that chapter of, I mean, whether you have children or not. Some women don't, and they still go, of course, through menopause, perimenopause. But it's like moving from that place where you are becoming wiser. You have this maturity and this degree of maturity that you didn't have when you were in your 40s or even before that. And it's this wisdom that only comes through age. And in the West, I think menopause and perimenopause is seen through like it's like a little bit inconvenient, and it's like, I don't want to say overly negative, because like I said, I don't have the experience myself, but there's like a stigma. It's like, oh, you know, I'm having my hot flashes, and I think of my mum and when she went through it, and it's like an inconvenience, and it's almost like, oh, that, you know, she's having her hot flashes, like give her space, like she's gonna be stressed. Or so then, you know, what hormone replacements are you gonna take, and how are you gonna medicate it, and how are you gonna manage this inconvenience that's occurred in your life? And I think what yoga philosophy tries to say is that it's not an inconvenience. It doesn't necessarily need to be managed in a medical way. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take drugs for it. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying it's the attitude towards it. And if we see it more as like a welcome part of life, it's like a milestone, it's a significant time which shows that you have lived this life so far. You're lucky enough to be at this age, which, you know, in previous generations, centuries ago, we didn't even get to that point. So we're getting to that age, we're getting through that age, and then the other side of it, we have this wisdom and this maturity and this grace that we maybe didn't have in younger times. And so it's changing the mindset through the ideas that come with yoga philosophy, that's saying like all of these phases come, and during these transitions we can learn and we can grow and we can evolve and we can use them for good. Like natural phases of life shouldn't be given a bad stigma or a bad rap or any of those things. And like my girlfriends now are talking about like what kind of hormone replacement therapy drugs they're going to use in a decade's time, and I'm like, we're not there yet. Like we don't have to think about it, but it's like even on everybody's minds already, and it's just become such a big thing, which is important, and it's so important to talk about, but it's also important to normalize it and embrace it and say, okay, like we're all these women and we're all having hot flashes, or what, let's jump in the sea together. I don't know.
Beautiful, beautiful explanation. Thank you for that. Is there any advice that you would like to give to women who are seeking to connect maybe more to themselves, to stimulate a more balanced female health, or to connect maybe differently to womanhood than what they've done before?
I think that yoga philosophy has a lot to say on sort of connection, but I think what's even more fascinating and been much more helpful to me, but it might be because of the relationship between the two, but is my understanding and exploration of Ayurveda, which has become like a big passion over the last 5 or 6 years. And that's where like the real connection comes from. Not the connection, but that's where the listening comes from. So I've always had this belief that you need to connect. Like that's sort of my value system. Like everything that I've done, even from my like earlier sort of teens and things, has been about trying to connect, like feeling in my body, feeling in my mind, trying to observe and notice. But like running to feel better, yoga to feel better, like there's a connection there. But then when you start to look at Ayurveda, which is, they call it yoga's sister science, and you look at the lessons of the energies, and essentially there's 3 energies. Do you know these, the gunas?
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's the 3
Please
energies.
tell about them.
Yeah, yeah. And they all exist in different degrees all the time, and we've taught them to our kids, and they're called tamas, rajas, and sattva, and we give them names with the kids. We call them Timmy, Tamas, Richie, Rajas, and Sally Sattva, and I name them to get the kids, because I'm like, this is like, you primary school should learn this stuff. Like this is how you identify what's going on in your physical experience all of the time. And so they're energies. So tamas is like inertia, is heaviness, is lethargy, is grumpiness, is like the thundery skies, is where you feel sluggish, you can't get off the sofa, depression comes under this. It's like a heaviness. It's in food, it's in processed food, it's in alcohol, it's in oversleeping, it's in binge watching Netflix, it's in all of these things, and it exists. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum Rajas, or we call Richie Rajas, and that's like where you're so scattered and agitated and fired up, and it's great if you're the CEO of a company and you have to like run like the most important board meeting, like you need it in your body, but you don't need it when you're trying to like drive through the city on lots of red lights, because you're going to cause an accident and feel road rage. But it exists, you know, in the ocean, in the waves, in the I was going to say in the wind, but like it's a very fired up energy, and that's when we feel anxious, we feel irritated, we feel angry, all of those sorts of things. And then you have Sally Sattva, which is like the calm in the middle. It's where things feel clear and clarity, and that's what you get after a run, or after a swim, or after yoga, or during yoga, during a run. It's when you feel like this connection. So the connection is the sattva, and I've always known that. But when you're not in sattva, then you're more tamasic or you're more rajasic. And it's not that we don't know those things exist, but when you give language to something, it helps you to identify it and make sense of it. So now you're like, oh yeah, so at this moment I feel much more tamasic, or at this moment I feel much more rajasic. And when you can put a language on it, it helps you then make decisions, because there's things you can do. So if you're feeling tamasic, you need to get up and you need to move. That's the only way. So I had it with my son the other day. He's like having a paddy about something. He's on the ground. He's like, my life is over. I like dragged him up, opened the door, put him outside, and he's like lying on the grass. So I kick the football at him, and I kick it again, and I kick it again. Eventually he stands up. I kick it again. Eventually he kicks it back to me. After 10 minutes, he's playing football with me. And I'm like, look, you're better. And he's like, uh-huh. So I'm like, you've gone from Timmy Tamasic to Sally Sattva through movement. And then the other one is Rajasic. If you're feeling very angry, okay, probably going for a run might feel good in the moment, but it's not going to take away the anger. So you need to do something a little bit more calming, maybe a meditation if you can. If you can't, because your mind's too wild, put on a really good song and then maybe sing it like 4 or 5 times. Like the other day I was feeling really, really rajasic, and I was going out to meet some friends, and I was like, okay, I'm driving in the car. I put a song on really loud, sang the chorus really loud. At the end, I'm still like, Urgh. So I was like, rewind, do it again, rewind, do it again. And like 4 songs later, I'm like, oh, finally back to sattva. But it's that constant play, isn't it? And then catching yourself, recognizing, and then coming back to that connection. So if the question is like, how do you give advice to help somebody feel connected? Yes, do yoga, do asana, but also understand why you're not feeling connected and where you are. And you're going to be on one of the two extremes to some degree. There isn't another energy. And learning to identify where you are, and then learning to identify the things that work for you to bring you back to the center, are the ways to be connected. So the wisdom of Ayurveda, and Ayurveda literally means the science of life. And so I think that's really important.
Well, thank you so much, Carrie. I think we've had a very beautiful conversation where it started off with you thinking, I'm not going to be able to answer anything. I mean, you've given us so much insight. So I really hope that all your reflections on yoga, on how you've been living interculturally and how that's kind of obviously developed and shaped you. I hope that that's kind of sparked really something also for the people listening. And I know it's a reminder to reconnect with your body, to find your center, and to navigate all the different transitions, right? And also I think to have trust in the process you're in.
Faith, yeah.
Right. So if you would like to learn more about Carrie, the Frog Project, you can find the Frog Project online, and I can share the link in the show notes. Please consider sharing this episode with more friends and leaving a review. It really help to let more people listen to this interesting words and this conversation with Carrie. So thank you so much for having been here and to share all your experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Colors of Womanhood. Whether you found a piece of yourself in today's story or it opened a new perspective, I hope it reminded you that your path, in all its colors, is valid, sacred, and worth honoring. If you're curious to explore your energy levels and reconnect with your inner energetic potential, I invite you to download Energize In, a free resource designed to give you a gentle yet powerful taster of what's possible when you tune into your feminine vitality. You'll find the link